and welcome to my first musical versus musical video. I chose to start doing these videos as a way to shed light on lesser known musicals and to let people who may not know much about certain musicals learn a little bit about them so they can compare another musical to a musical they know. Also, it's because it's a way to indulge in my musical geekiness since I can't exactly audition for musicals right now. In the description box, I have a link to a SurveyMonkey for you to cast your vote on which musical you think wins. Please wait to cast your vote until the end of the video in case you change your mind, or at least in respect for the loser. That sounds harsh. The second place winner out of 2. Eventually, I'll pin the winners against each other and create a bracket, but we have a ways to go until then. Today, I chose the musicals 1776 and Hamilton. Both set during the American Revolution, these musicals both tell a story of the creation of the United States of America. But which will win? Wait and see. Also, side note, as you can see, I decided to do my makeup in respect for these musicals. Okay, first thing I'll do is describe each musical in its own right, and then I'll talk about the productions I may or may not have seen of these musicals live or bootleg. Then I will compare them. Let's go in chronological order, both when they came out and in the storytelling. 1776. The musical 1776 was written by Peter Stone, music and lyrics by Sherman Edwards. The Broadway premiere was in 1969 and then the revival in 1997. There was 1,217 performances on Broadway. The Tonys in 1969. It had 5 nominations and 3 wins. Best Musical, Best Performance by a Male Actor in a Musical, Ron Holgate. Best Direction of a Musical, Peter Hunt. For the revival in 1997, 3 nominations, no wins. So the synopsis of the musical. The Continental Congress is at each other's throat over the question of independence from Great Britain. John Adams knows if the Congress does not agree to throw off Britain's tyranny, General Washington's outnumbered army will have no basis to fight for. But no one will listen to Adams' arguments. With the help of Benjamin Franklin's popularity and Thomas Jefferson's writing skills, Congress is able to deliberate terms of the Declaration of Independence. Compromises were made to Jefferson and Adams' ideas for the Declaration in order to have a united front against Great Britain. The biggest compromise which was made was in terms of who was to gain freedom. The original draft included freedom to all who lived in the new country. However, the South would not sign if the terms included their slaves gaining freedom. Once those who wanted the right for slaves to be free decided this situation could be changed later and a united front was more important, the compromise was made and the Declaration of Independence was signed. The version I saw live was a high school version. They gender bent most of the roles except for the 3 leads stated and the wives. Also, given the student population had a high percentage of minorities, the roles were also diverse. One role that was specifically given to a black teen was the role of Edward Rutledge. Rutledge was the delegate from South Carolina who sings Molasses to Rum and is the driving voice behind keeping slavery in the South.
Cry of the auctioneer! Slave gentlemen, black gold!
Was it impactful? Yes. It was a very good production. Those in it were a cut above the average high school theater kid in regards to talent. So that was 1776. Now on to Hamilton. Hamilton. Books, music, and lyrics by Lin-Manuel Miranda. I couldn't find a number of the performances on Broadway because technically it's just postponed due to COVID, but it's still technically running on Broadway. Now the Tonys. 16 nominations, 11 wins. I want to say right now, I hope I pronounce all of these names right. I probably won't. The wins were Best Musical, Best Book of a Musical, Best Original Score, Best Direction of a Musical, Thomas Kail, Best Orchestrations, Alex Lacamoire, Best Performance by a Leading Actor in a Musical, Leslie Odom Jr., Best Performance by a Featured Actress in a Musical, Renee Elise Goldsberry, Best Performance by a Featured Actor in a Musical, Daveed Diggs, Best Costume Design of a Musical, Paul Tazewell, Best Choreography, Andy Blankenbuehler, Best Lighting Design of a Musical, Howell Binkley. Hamilton takes place during the beginnings of the American Revolution against Great Britain. Alexander Hamilton traveled to the colonies from the Caribbean wanting to be part of the revolution in order to create a legacy for himself. He begins to social climb his way into George Washington's staff as his secretary. He also marries into the wealthy Schuyler family. When the war ends, Alexander begins writing the Federalist Papers, a series of essays defending the Constitution. He also continues the social climb into President George Washington's staff, being in charge of the Treasury. Wanting to keep busy, Hamilton stays home while his family goes upstate on a summer holiday. During this time, Hamilton cheats on his wife and is blackmailed by the husband of the woman he cheated with. In order not to let this situation get worse for himself, he publishes the affair in the papers. This betrayal, as well as being the reason for his own son's death, causes Eliza, his wife, to emotionally separate herself from Alexander. Alexander, from this point on, concentrates his priorities on amending his relationship with his wife instead of pursuing more political fame. Unknowingly swaying votes towards Thomas Jefferson instead of his friend/foe Aaron Burr for presidency, Hamilton is challenged to a duel by Burr, thus ending Alexander's story. In the finale, Eliza explains what she did after her husband's death, compiling his story and the stories of his friends, thus creating the legacy Alexander sought out for his entire life. So where to begin? I saw the show live while it was touring. It was one thing hearing the music and another thing seeing everything put together. It was an experience. As I am sure many of you are well aware, the cast is diverse, but honestly it didn't put me off from the story. I think it was because the hip-hop, pop rock music was also non-historic. It all fit. The costumes were as period accurate as you can get with live stage performances. Obviously, historic undergarments were not used to allow for better movement and ease of quick changes, but it was visually historically accurate. Eliza and the women in the beginning of the story wear the more poofier skirt, and later on in the musical you see them wearing more of the umpire waist, which were more of an early 1800s fashion. Now onto the comparisons. In 1776, there are 3 leads and no ensemble. All the characters are named. In Hamilton, there are many leads and many featured actors and actresses, but there's also a decent-sized ensemble. For dancing, 1776, it's sparse to none. In Hamilton, yeah, there's dancing. Now for historical accuracy, we'll start with 1776. Because the version I saw live is not the norm for this show, I will discuss the original production casts. All white. Accurate? Yeah. All men in roles of power. Accurate? Yeah. Except for the singing, for the most part, the show is decently accurate. The debates were never written down, so the conversations being had during these discussions were assumed for the show based on individuals' written accounts after the fact, as well as educated guesses by the writers of the musical. Also, the Declaration of Independence was approved on the 4th of July, but was not actually signed on the 4th of July. In the musical, it was signed on the 4th of July for dramatic purposes, but in real life it was actually signed on August 2nd of that year. The portrayals of some characters were off. John Adams was written as obnoxious and overall disliked by the other congressmen, when historically he was one of the most respected members of Congress. He became disliked in history after his presidency. Not all 50 members of Congress are shown in the musical. Not that I think any production should. That'd be way too many people on stage. As much as the musical wishes to portray a more divided front on the idea of freeing slaves, there are many North congressmen who felt the same as the South in those regards. Piggybacking on that, the musical tries to paint Rutledge as the bad guy because of his views on slavery, but in actuality, he wasn't alone. So, bad guy, yes. The only bad guy? No. There are more, but these are the ones that stood out the most. Now let's look at Hamilton inaccuracies. Well, besides the fact that singing and dancing were not historically accurate. I'll point out the other obvious inaccuracy. Not everyone's white. I had to say it. It's true. But story-wise, one inaccuracy is how Angelica Schuyler is portrayed. In the musical, she is the oldest daughter with no brothers and is single when she meets Alexander Hamilton. In reality, she has 2 brothers who survived into adulthood, and she is already married with 2 kids by the time she meets Alexander. Another inaccuracy is that Aaron Burr didn't play a big role in the beginning of Alexander's life in the colonies, as the musical portrays. He is put there in the musical to create a solid antagonist to Hamilton. Continuing, in the musical, Jefferson, Madison, and Burr were the ones who confronted Hamilton about his affair, when in actuality it was James Monroe, Frederick Muhlenberg, and Abraham Venable. Since those 3 people were never written into the musical, it makes sense why they were changed. Also, the musical portrays the Reynolds pamphlet, the article published by Hamilton explaining the affair, as Hamilton's political downfall. It was actually a later pamphlet published criticizing Adams during his election that ended Hamilton's political career. The duel that killed Philip Hamilton in the musical was also inaccurate. He did die during the duel, but in the musical, Ecker shot during the count of 7 instead of the count of 10, when in actuality they both refused to shoot for long minutes before Ecker finally shot Philip in the hip. Maybe assuming it was less likely to be fatal, maybe he was a bad shot, I don't know. Finishing up, the duel that eventually killed Alexander Hamilton wasn't brought on due to Burr losing the presidency to Jefferson. It was because of a letter that was published later. It was from Charles D. Cooper to Philip Schuyler, Hamilton's father-in-law, after Burr lost the election of the governor's seat of New York. The letter claimed Alexander had said that Burr was a dangerous man and one that ought not to be trusted with the reins of government. I wonder why Burr didn't like that. Another criteria I'll debate them on was social impact. Now, in case someone watching this video has lived under a rock with no internet connection and no connection to the outside world, hello. How did you find this video? Be careful, there's a pandemic out there. Also, Hamilton's made a bit of a splash.
Immigrants, we get the job done.
I feel it has more to do with the music and casting choices than the story, honestly. The story is great, but being paired with popular-sounding music and a diverse cast, it is exactly what the Broadway community was missing. There was an opening for Hamilton, and it took it. It's the first of its kind to do so, and as boldly as it did. I love that this musical has brought new blood to the theater world, and that it makes history fun. Speaking of history, let's look at 1776. Not the greatest segue, but it needed to at least be mentioned. 1776 was critically welcomed in the world of 1969. Watching it now, it can be a bit stale in comparison to musicals we see now.
I live like a nun in a cloister, solitary celibate. I hate it, and you, Joe?
I live like a monk in an abbey. Ditto, ditto, I hate it.
But we are critiquing this with our 2020 eyes. The year, not perfect vision. Just like if we are to compare The Music Man and West Side Story now, we would have a very different view, or at least I do, than the year those 2 premiered on Broadway. The Music Man and West Side Story were both up for Tony Awards Best Musical the same year, and The Music Man won. So we experienced things differently than people did in those times. I pinned these 2 musicals against each other, not because I was giving 1776 a fair shot. I threw away its shot. But because these 2 are historically set in the same general period, showing how 2 musicals set in the same general time period can be portrayed very differently. If it isn't obvious, my winner is Hamilton. Hands down, no competition in my mind. For those who think I wasn't fair to 1776 for comparing it to a worldwide phenomenon like Hamilton, well, if it wasn't going to beat Hamilton, why prolong the inevitable? Do you agree with my opinion? Do you disagree? let me know in the comments. Also, let me know if there's anything I missed that you feel should be put into consideration for making the decision on which musical is the better musical. My future musical comparisons will be a bit more equally weighed, so there will be many chances for debates in the comments. As a reminder, I have a link to the SurveyMonkey in my description box for you to vote on your favorite. Thank you for watching my very first musical versus musical video. I hope you enjoyed it. Like and subscribe if you want to. You don't have to, but I'd appreciate it. Bye. Each video will... I love you too. As it did. Yeah. Yes. I know. He's right here. He's my cutie. Anyway. Oh. Look at the baby. Look at the baby. I love that it You ate all your food. That's probably what you want. Hold on. I put his food in the Temptations because he thinks they're treats then. Because we both need to lose weight. You eat all those treats. Yeah. There you go. So we experience things differently now than people did in those times. My sweetie. My sweetie baby. No, 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 no. My baby. My baby boy. I love him. Sometimes he just wants to be held. He's my baby. Oh, you happy boy. You're a happy boy. I love you. So we experience things differently than people for making a decision on the musical. Or immediately when I turned off this video, he decided to get off the table.